Yes, indeed. So here we are now. I know that we're living in silly times, as you all know. And it's difficult to be idealistic in 20th century America, 21st century America. And of course, I'm always thinking about stuff, and we were doing this song, and I always figure there's a history lesson that needs to happen with this song, so I'm going to try to make it really quick. In 1968, there were a bunch of guys, a bunch of women. They called themselves the Yippies, the Youth International Party, and it was Abby Hoffman, Jerry Rubin, Tom Hayden, Dave Dellinger, and a guy named Bobby Seale, who was one of the founders of the Black Panther Party. And they got other guys, Tom Florence. And they put on this show. They wanted to put on this show around the same time the Democratic National Convention in Chicago to protest it. And they called it the Festival of Life. And interestingly enough, before they did this, our liberal Democratic Congress in 1968 passed an amendment to the 1968 Civil Rights Act that made conspiracy to riot a crime. And it had, interestingly enough, there's no modern thing going on here that's similar. It had a very broad definition of what a riot was. We have never heard anything like that before. So as a gift to the people who fought for their civil rights, they passed this law so that it would be very easy to convict people if any violence happened at a gathering that you had. So, you know, if, for instance, you're a football player or you got a football team, they could probably prosecute the football team for fights that break out. Funny, they don't do that much, do they? But anyway, they passed this law, and it was kind of broadly, vaguely unconstitutional on its face, but it had to be passed. And at the time, Lyndon Johnson, catching wind of the massive demonstrations, started losing primaries and decided not to run for president, and so it was a wide open Democratic primary in the hot summer of 1968 in Chicago. And when they had this convention, they tried to hold this Festival of Life, and they invited a whole bunch of bands to come play. And only one big name band actually did come play, and they were called the MC5. But they had this party, they had this festival, they had this convention. It was heavily debated. And while the debates were going on inside the convention, the cops had what even the mainstream police, not police, but the people who watched the police, allegedly, called it a police riot. The cops went batshit. They started pounding on anybody and everybody, little old ladies, moms and kids, anybody that was around the area of this party that was going on called the Festival of Life, and unlike in today's news, it made the news. So they had this party, a lot of people got hurt. Richard Nixon, of course, was elected in 1968, and he and J. Edgar Hoover decided that they really needed to test this new law that had been a gift to them from the Liberal Congress. So they indicted these 7 and 8 guys, these 8 people, and one of these guys was a guy named Bobby Seale, one of the leaders of the Black Panther Party. And the thing about this trial was that everybody knew that it was a kangaroo court from the start. They knew that the law was wrong, and so the defendants expected to go to jail. And so, since they were going to go to jail anyway, they decided that they would make a circus of the event. And it was 5 months of trial starting in September, and they made a circus of it. It was lovely. The idea was that Abby Hoffman was quoted as saying that when decorum becomes oppression, the only dignity free men have is to speak out. So, legal technicalities happened, and they wouldn't let Bobby Seale have his own lawyer, and Bobby Seale felt like he ought to have his own lawyer, and who had some surgery and was recovering from it. And so he would try to represent himself in spite of the judge trying to tell him that he couldn't. And he would stand up and say, I demand to cross-examine the witness. I demand my rights. And finally, the judge got sick of it. He just said that it's not going to happen. He told the bailiff to do with that man what must be done. And they took the only black man in an 8-person trial, and they chained him to a chair, and they gagged him. And they started by chaining him to a folding chair with a pretty loose gag. And that lasted about 30 seconds, and he rolled over on the chair, and he stood up, and he said, "God damn it, I demand my rights." So they did it again. He got a bigger chair. And every time he got out of it, and he got out of it something like a dozen times, they got bigger chairs and bigger chains and tighter ropes. And finally, after not being able to shut Bobby Seale up, they severed his case from the trial. And that's what the first line of this song is about. Of course, everything was turned over on appeal. The law was found to be unconstitutional. The judge and the prosecutor had colluded with Richard Nixon to make it happen. And it was all for show. Of course, with consequences for all kinds of people. So here's the tune.